Antifa, also known as anti-fascist, is a movement that many of the youth today have gotten themselves involved with. Most involved today have no idea of its history or what it stands for. When one hears a term like anti-fascist, most sense its negative connotation. However, although the term anti-fascist literally describes being against something, it then must also be for something. But what? What does it mean? That is the question that most of the youth that have aligned themselves with these groups can't answer. They have no idea what or who they're fighting for. They only know what they believe they're fighting against. Let's look at where it began. During World War II in Germany and in parts of the Mediterranean, fascism had taken hold. However, there was a competing ideology, communism. It was groups of communists in Europe that started the Antifa movement. More specifically the youth in Germany. Anti-fascism became the official ideology of Stalinist parties, although anarchists and migrant activists have also continued to identify as anti-fascists. The movement would continue through the end of World War II and right on through the Cold War. The resurgence. It would have an almost rebirth, or resurgence in the 1990s after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Once again the communists would fight against what they saw as right-wing fascist groups. Keep in mind, although these groups were fighting fascism, it wasn't fighting fascism for freedom. Rather they wanted to replace it with communism. Today in Europe, as well as in the Americas, Antifa groups are back at it. The communists, the anarchists, the migrant populations, some of which are here illegally or are refugees, have decided to fight for their cause. Whether it was during World War II, the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall or today, the Antifa still have one thing in common: they have large numbers of what they call useful idiots. This group is usually made up of the youth. Those that have no direction, they're either in college or from poor communities that feel disenfranchised with the establishment. They join these groups feeling like they're fighting against something, they're fighting against the establishment. They're fighting against the powers that are holding them back. What they don't realize is that all of the other people standing around them aren't just fighting against those same things, they are also fighting for something. The end game. Now, the communist and the anarchists don't have the same goals, other than fighting the powers that hold them back. They've decided that they will fight one enemy at a time. When that one is defeated, they will fight the other ones standing next to them. They will continue to fight until only one is left standing. Unfortunately for most of the useful idiots left standing within the group, they're disposable and they don't even realize what they've done. In the United States, with the exception of a few protests, usually the protests are fairly peaceful. But, recently they have become more violent. They have begun to look like the protests we would see in Europe. People dressed in black, faces covered, carrying sticks and throwing stones. It appears that the groups that would organize the riots in Europe have begun to organize in the United States. These are some of the same groups that traveled the Arab world several years ago, sparking the Arab Spring, encouraging revolution and spreading chaos throughout the Middle East. Now they've got their eyes set on Europe and the United States. One of these groups is known as BAM, by any means necessary. One of their leaders is a school teacher in California. This is possibly why so many of the protests have been concentrated along the West Coast. When listening to those in the modern American Antifa movement, it's like they're reading from the same playbook as those in Europe. The contemporary Antifa movement in Germany includes those who are willing to use violence. Militant behavior against police is an expression of the Autonomous-Szene and part of the concept anti-fascist action or any fascist action. We have seen Antifa posters with mottos that sometimes call for not only violence against police or skinheads but also bishops and judges. There are slogans like anti-fascism means attack not only against neo-Nazis but also against the civil and capitalist system. Does this all sound familiar? Are the slogans and the logos all too similar? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. We can only hope that the outcome today will be similar to the outcomes of the past. Although the Antifa movement continued with their pro-communist, pro-anarchist ideology intact, there has always been a more powerful ideology keeping control. It is a pro-freedom, pro-capitalism and by definition, an anti-fascist anti-communist movement. It is simply, Western democracy, free market capitalism. The left-wing group that helped organize the violent shutdown of the Milo Yiannopoulos event at the University of California, Berkeley is backed by a progressive charity that is in turn funded by George Soros, a major labor union and several large companies. The Alliance for Global Justice, based in Tucson, is listed as an organizer and fiscal sponsor for Refused Fascism, a communist group that encouraged left-wingers to shut down the Yiannopoulos event. The call to arms succeeded. Yiannopoulos' talk was cancelled after demonstrators lit fires, vandalized businesses, and assaulted Donald Trump and Yiannopoulos supporters. Refused Fascism, which includes Princeton professor Cornel West as one of its founding initiators, defended the response, issuing a statement on its website that called the shutdown righteous. And DNC platform member Cornel West is tied to group behind Berkeley violence. And on its Facebook page, the group asserted that the vandalism and arson were not violence. Instead, the group argued that Yiannopoulos and Trump perpetrate violence through the policies they support. Dismantling police fences is not violent. And to compare preventing someone like that from speaking to the real-world violence that they perpetuate every day is ludicrous, reads one post on the group's Facebook page. The organization did not mention the violent attacks against conservatives. One Trump backer was attacked with shovels by a group of men clad in black. He was shown laying unconscious in the middle of the street. A female Trump supporter was blasted with pepper spray while giving an on-camera interview. Refused Fascism's involvement has spurred questions about who is behind the group. In a series of tweets, Trump asserted that the protesters were paid to agitate. While it is unclear whether those who carried out the violence were paid to do so, the benefactors of the Alliance for Global Justice, and Refused Fascism, are listed online. According to its most recent 990 tax form, Alliance for Global Justice, FGJ, received $2.2 million in funding for the fiscal year ending in March 2016. One of the group's biggest donors is the Tides Foundation, a nonprofit funded by billionaire progressive philanthropist George Soros. Tides gave AFGJ $50,000. The United Steelworkers Labor Union also contributed $5,000. The city of Tucson is also listed in FGJ's 990 as a donor, but a city official says that the city acted merely as a pass-through for a Native American tribe that provided a grant to the activist group. The city official said that no city money went to AFGJ. During a demonstration over right-wing speaker Milo Yiannopoulos in Berkeley, charities associated with several major corporations also donated. Patagonia.org, the outdoor apparel and equipment company, gave $40,000. The Ben & Jerry Foundation, the charity associated with the ice cream maker, gave $20,000. And Lush Cosmetic gave $43,950. Another bit of irony is seen in the $5,000 contribution from the Peace Development Fund, a group that claims to support organizations that fight for human rights and social justice. Another major donation came from a group that was chaired by Hillary Clinton during the 1980s. The New World Foundation gave $52,000 to AFGJ. Refused Fascism did not respond to a request for comment for this article. Chuck Kaufman, the national coordinator for AFGJ, said he was only aware of the Berkeley protests through social media. I wasn't aware that Refused Fascism was involved, but probably they were one of a whole lot of groups calling to shut down Milo Yiannopoulos' hate speech, he told the Daily Caller. AFGJ acts as fiscal sponsor for Refused Fascism, which means we process tax-deductible donations for them. As long as their use of the money falls into areas permitted for tax-exempt 501c3 organizations, we don't involve ourselves one way or the other in their program work. It is important to follow the money to know who is funding this attempt to take over America. Groups inside the DNC and RNC, the CFR and Soros history will show that it's not a political movement but treason by traitors within the country.